Hello, and welcome to this presentation on how to fill out the Voyager to ALMA migration form. In this session, we will give a step-by-step explanation on how to fill out the ALMA migration form, which is the first phase in the migration process from Voyager. We will explain exactly which information you need to supply to Ex Libris regarding each Voyager component that is to be migrated to ALMA and how exactly to input that data. Once the form has been completed, it is read by the migration programs and the information automatically uploaded during the migration process. In addition, we will show you how the validation tool checks the migration form and alerts you to errors in data which will prevent the successful loading of your preferences during the migration process. By the end of this training session, you should be able to fill out the Voyager to ALMA migration form and work with the migration form data validation tools.
Before we get started on the form, I want to mention some additional documentation available regarding this subject. This presentation should be used along with the Voyager to ALMA Migration Guide, which contains information not covered in this session. It is suggested that you read the Getting Ready for ALMA Implementation document available on the Ex Libris Documentation Center under ALMA Implementation. It is also recommended that you view the Introduction to Configuration video session before completing your migration form, as the mapping and migration of libraries and locations have implications for subsequent configurations. During this session, we will take a closer look at how the validation tool checks the migration form and alerts you to errors in data which would prevent the successful loading of your preferences during the migration process. The migration form is broken down into a number of tabs. We will cover the population of the questionnaire tab and provide instructions for filling out the various fields. We will also provide instructions for how to fill out each individual tab on the migration form, such as ALMA Libraries, Location Mapping, and Reporting Codes tab. At certain times, we will also provide some explanations about the migration processes that do not need customer input, but are important to know. The migration form is used by our automated migration programs in order to convert your data for use in ALMA. Therefore, it is important that the data entered by your institution be valid so that the migration can continue on schedule. Whenever there are problems with the data inputted by the institution, we need to go back and have it corrected. To assist in reducing these type of errors, you will see that the first tab of the migration form, named Cover, contains a validation tool that helps ensure that your data is valid before you submit the form to Ex Libris. Please note that when opening the form, you must enable macros in Excel in order to use the migration form validation tool. This form should not be saved in any other format than Excel macro-enabled worksheet. After you've completed filling out the form, you would click the Launch button, as seen over here from the Cover tab, to begin the validation process. A list of self-explanatory errors will then appear in the window, as you can see over here. You would click on the Go To link over here next to the errors to go directly to the data element in question, where you can then make the correction. Afterwards, you can rerun the validation to confirm that it has been fixed. For example, to be taken over here, you would then go back to the cover page. Over the course of the presentation, we will show examples of what would cause a data validation error and what needs to be done in order to correct it. Once you have corrected all the data errors, the validation tool will appear like this. The summary will indicate that there are no errors in any of the sheets or fields, and the log will be empty. At this point in time, the form is ready to be submitted to Ex Libris for the migration operation to be started. Let's take a look at the following questions in the General section of the Questionnaire tab. Please note that institution code and customer code are supposed to be filled in by Ex Libris. If you have received the migration form without your institution code and customer code, please consult with your Ex Libris contact to obtain them. In addition, the institution ID should also be filled in with a value by Ex Libris. For institution name and customer name, please note that these are mandatory fields and need to be filled in by your institution. The only time when the institution name and customer name would be different is if you are part of a consortium. For Voyager DB name to migrate, this question is mandatory and should be limited to one database name. The value in this field is the name of your database on your Voyager server. For example, it must follow that format of Voyager database name with DB in lowercase letters at the end. The time zone should be chosen from one of the options in the drop-down list. For this question, if your institution shares a Voyager database with another institution, you may have contracted to have Ex Libris extract only part of the Voyager database. Most customers do not have this situation and should therefore leave the response as no. In the event that you have left any of these fields blank or entered in an invalid value, the validation tool will alert you to these errors. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of these things. First of all, we'll go ahead and delete the institution name and time zone. We'll also go ahead and change the format of the Voyager database name to use uppercase letters. When we step over to the Cover tab and run the validation, we can see that we've been alerted to these three errors over here. We'll go ahead and click on the hyperlink, fill this back in like it's supposed to be. Step back over to the Cover tab. Take a look at the next error over here and see that we need to change this back to lowercase. And while we're here, we'll also put our time zone back in. When we step back over to the Cover tab, rerun the validation, we'll see that those errors are no longer there, and the next error on the Questionnaire tab belongs to a value we'll fill in later on. Let's take a look at the following questions in the Inventory section of the Questionnaire tab. For the Inventory section, the first field is whether your institution would like to migrate bib records which were imported from SFX. In order to allow online journal subscriptions to be discoverable in the Voyager OPAC, some Voyager customers imported bibliographic records from SFX into Voyager using Market, with the SFX number denoted in the 035 field. If the migration also harvests online subscription information from SFX, this may result in duplicate entries of the SFX bibliographic records. That is, you may have bibliographic records from SFX and also bibliographic records from SFX by way of Voyager. To migrate SFX records, select Yes. The default and our recommendation is to answer No to avoid creating duplicate SFX records. Please note that even if you answer No and the SFX records in Voyager are connected to a purchase order line or have items attached, they are still migrated but are automatically suppressed to avoid end-user discovery duplication. If you have bibliographic records in Voyager from a different discovery system, simply answer No to this question. If the records from the different discovery system are duplicated in ALMA, you can identify them after migration and batch suppress them. We're going to go ahead and enter in No. If you answered No to the previous question and you use SFX for your management system, then put SFX here. The migration program will look for the string in the 035 subfield A and skip the records where the string is found. If you use a different management system other than SFX, put a string that indicates records from that system here. The default is SFX, and we'll go ahead and enter that in as well. Here you will decide if you want to migrate e-items which are used for course reserves. The default for this question is No. In general, e-items in Voyager are migrated as physical items in ALMA with a material type of link. The e-link or web address that is currently stored in the e-item is moved to the holdings record as an 856 link. You can refer to the ALMA migration guide for more information on how the 856 link is structured. The default for migrate suppressed serial issues is also No. Here, you will decide if serial issues that are flagged as suppressed in the OPAC should be migrated to ALMA. Fill in Yes for serial issues marked as OPAC suppressed in Voyager to be migrated to ALMA with a note indicating that they are suppressed in Voyager. If you answer No, the suppressed issues are not moved to ALMA. However, you should be aware that the suppressed issue may have a receipt history that is also not moved to ALMA. We'll go ahead and enter in No. For MARC organizational code, please note that this field is mandatory and must be filled in. Here you would enter in your MARC organization code for inclusion in the former system number as it is migrated to ALMA. If your institution has more than a single MARC organization code, you should choose just one for use in conversion. Typically, there is one that represents the institution as a whole, and that's the one that should be used. Any institution that does not have a MARC organization code can apply for one. Ex Libris strongly recommends that all customers use their MARC organization code when migrating to ALMA, as it helps identify the owner of the record. If you do not have a code or do not want to use one, you would fill in the word Voyager. We're going to go ahead and enter in a MARC code. For this question, you would decide if you want to include Voyager as the source system in the 035 field. If yes, please note that this number is placed in a new 035 field in all bibliographic records. The default for this question is no. You should fill in no if you answered Voyager to the previous question. If you want to see how it would look depending on your choice, please take a look over here. We're going to go ahead and choose no. Here you can provide the 9XX tag in which you would like the ownership information stored in the bibliographic record when it is migrated to ALMA. Catalogers are able to assign an owning library to a bibliographic record in the Voyager cataloging client. Assignment of an owning library to a bibliographic record limits who can edit that bibliographic record. In ALMA, this information is stored in a 9XX tag in the bibliographic record. However, if there is only one owning library for a database, no owning library is assigned to any bibliographic record, since the ALMA institutional ownership is implicit. This is an optional field, and the default is to leave it blank. We're going to go ahead and leave it blank as well. For the Move 852 subfield C to another subfield question, if you have data in your Voyager holdings record 852 subfield C, you should decide to which subfield you want that information moved. If nothing is specified or the response is incorrect, such as a yes or no instead of a specific subfield, then the default subfield of K will be used. For more information about this question, please refer to the ALMA location section of the ALMA Migration Guide. You would indicate here if you use the local system number in subfield W of the 76X or 78X linking fields. When bibliographic records are related to each other, such as journal title that is superseded by a second journal title, Voyager stores the information in bibliographic tags and relies on tag indexing to create a link between the records. Some Voyager customers use the Voyager system number in subfield W to make a direct link between the two records, while others rely on more general identifiers specified in other subfields such as ISBN or ISSN. The linking tags 760, 787 are migrated from Voyager to ALMA as they currently exist. But if you answer yes to this question, subfield W are converted from the Voyager system number to the ALMA system number. In ALMA, the system numbers in subfield W along with Z and X are used to link two related bibliographic records using the related records process. We're going to go ahead and enter in yes. If you answered yes to the previous question and the internal system numbers have a prefix, enter the value to which we will match to identify the local system number. If the internal system numbers do not have a prefix, or you answered no to the previous question, you would leave this question blank. Since we answered yes in the previous question, we will show what they look like with a prefix. Here you should provide a string to put as a prefix to the number in 019 when it is copied to the 035 subfield Z. Nothing will be added to the prefix you provide. And this covers the inventory section on the questionnaire tab. The library tab is used to create a list of libraries in ALMA. During the migration process, you need to provide your preferences for migrating the single-level Voyager location information into the two-level ALMA structure of library and physical location. The first step is to determine your list of libraries in ALMA. You will use this tab to create that list, and please remember that at least one library is mandatory. First, we will enter in the ALMA library code. It is restricted to a maximum of 10 characters. You should not use special characters such as slashes or spaces, and although mixed case is valid, it is not recommended. If you enter in a library code that is longer than 10 characters, you will see the following error message. A dialog box will pop up letting you know that this is an invalid entry. You could copy-paste over this validation, but then the validation tool on the cover page would catch that as well. The ALMA library name is how the library will appear in ALMA and will be visible to the public. There is a maximum limit of 255 characters, and just like the ALMA library code, if you exceed this limit, you will get a warning error here, and the validation tool will flag it as well. In the address lines, you can specify the address, phone, and email information about each library. It is mandatory for a library to have a shipping and billing address in order to place orders in ALMA. The migration processes sets the designated address provided with all possible types in ALMA, such as shipping, billing, claiming, and so forth. In the last field, you need to enter in the default language, which indicates the language of patrons and staff members if it differs for each library. We'll go ahead and enter in English. For more information about language codes, you can click on the link at the bottom of the ALMA library slide in the PowerPoint, and also consult with the Voyager to ALMA migration guide. Let's take a quick look at a validation error you might have on this page. If I were to go ahead and delete one of the ALMA library codes, as I've done over here, and head over to the cover page and run it, it would notify me that the cell should not be empty. I'll go ahead and fill it in, head back to the cover page, rerun, and the ALMA library error is no longer there. Please note that Voyager has one level of location and ALMA has two levels, library and physical shelving location. Locations in Voyager are generally analogous to the physical shelving locations in ALMA. Libraries are higher level units that contain groups of locations. A list of ALMA libraries must be created with locations on migration to ALMA. ALMA libraries serve as higher-level repositories for physical records and also determine policy groupings for their management and fulfillment. The lower-level physical location does not determine policy for an item and is only the physical shelving location or collection. All physical resources in your institution must belong to a library and a location. In Voyager, there is only one level of location, the Voyager location. It may be a storage location, a happening location, or a print location. In addition, Voyager has policy groups that combine locations that share the same policies. An ALMA library can be viewed as a combination of the Voyager policy and the Voyager happening location, but it is also a local entity where the item is located. Ex Libris recommends that your list of libraries closely mimic your policy groupings together with your happening locations, which often represent a group of locations from an organizational perspective. If you use an error library, for example, in the ALMA val not found line of the location mapping tab, which we'll take a look at in a minute, you should go ahead and enter it in over here. We'll go ahead and put in empty and the library name of empty as well. Let's move over to the ALMA Mapping Location tab. You will use this tab to map your Voyager locations to libraries and locations in ALMA. The Ex Libris migration program pre-populates this tab with your existing Voyager location codes. The sheet will contain all of your Voyager locations, including the happening locations. You do, however, need to fill in the ALMA library code for each location and modify the ALMA location code, location name, and external location names. Please make sure to include all locations of all types, including electronic types that may ultimately be deleted in ALMA. They still need to be provided in the Location tab mapping. Let's take a look over here. For the Voyager location code, this column is filled in with the codes from your Voyager database to make filling out this form easier. In the ALMA library code column, you will fill in the library that contains this location in ALMA. This code must be present on the ALMA library tab in column A and would have to be chosen from the drop-down list over here. In ALMA location code, you would fill in the new location code for this location in ALMA. It is limited to a maximum of 10 characters. You may use the same location codes in ALMA that you use in Voyager, however, this is not required. You may also use this form to consolidate locations if you wish to do so. An example of this can be seen over here in green, where a number of electronic resource locations in Voyager were then mapped to a single location in ALMA. You should not use special characters like slashes or spaces, and be sure to provide location codes for all locations listed, even the happening locations. For ALMA location name, you should give a description for this location as seen and used by library staff members. The same location name cannot be used for different locations in the same library, but the same location name can be used for different locations in different libraries. For external ALMA location name, you would provide a description for this location, as will be seen and used by the public. The same name can be used for several different locations. For use in ALMA location mapping table, you would choose either yes or no. The migration generates a configuration table that contains the location codes and location names so that they can be translated for staff or public use. When generating the configuration table, do not include locations that will not be used going forward. However, all locations are required to remain in the location mapping spreadsheet for conversion purposes. For those locations that you do not want to carry over into ALMA, you would enter no in the Use in ALMA Location mapping table column. The intention of the migration program is that the Voyager happening location, circulation desks, acquisitions, ordering units are marked no, but that any location that is used in an item or holding record is marked yes. The migration programs use the location spreadsheet to map each and every item from a Voyager location to an ALMA location. In addition, the migration programs use the location spreadsheet to map locations in many other data elements. For example, circulation locations are mapped when migrating loans and requests, and acquisitions locations are mapped when migrating orders and invoices. In the electronic location column, please indicate yes or no. This will be used later on by the physical to electronic migration process to determine if a holding item or associated orders should be converted to electronic in ALMA. We'll look at the P2E customer inputs on the migration form a little bit later. In the final column, to suppress from externalization, you should indicate if the location should be suppressed from being visible to the public. The items won't be marked as suppressed, but no holdings or items with this location code will be exported to Primo Discovery. While we're on this tab, I would like to add a little more information about the ALMA Me val not found value. This value must be included at the top of the list of locations, in case any location codes were overlooked when completing this map. By default, the location code for this value is unassigned, which is the default catch-all in ALMA when in production mode. In our example, we use empty for ALMA on the ALMA Library tab. In this case, the items inherit the configurations associated with it on the ALMA Library tab. After the migration, you could then search for items in the unassigned location or correct the records appropriately. Please note that you should not leave the ALMA location and library code fields blank. If you want to stop using a location code after migration, map the Voyager code to an easily identifiable code, such as unused, as you can see over here, just in case any stray items are still in your Voyager database. Let's go ahead and take a look at a number of errors, of validation errors, that could potentially be caused on this page. We're going to move over to the validation page, click on the Launch button, and see that we have padding spaces on this page. We'll go ahead, click into the cell where we've been taken directly to, remove the padding space, and go back to the cover page. As you can see, those errors are now gone. If, for example, this value was gone and we ran a validation, we would also be told that it's missing. And once entered back in, would no longer be flagged. This covers this section for inventory in the migration form. You can refer to the Voyager to ALMA Migration Guide document for more information about the migration of inventory to ALMA. Let's go back to the Questionnaire tab and discuss the fields related to fulfillment. Please note that patron records are required and must be supplied by the institution if loans, requests, or fines are being migrated. Patron records can always be updated post-migration with the patron update routines. Here you will specify a bibliographic tag and subfield that indicates if the bibliographic record is attached to the course. This is optional, and we're going to go ahead and leave it blank. For this question of which identification number should be used by patrons as the primary identifier, you would select the identifier to be used as primary for the external patrons. Externally managed users are created and managed by an external system. The default for this field is Institution ID. However, you can choose the barcode option from the drop-down if you would like. If you want to use a different field from either one of these, then please contact your Ex Libris project team to discuss. We're going to go ahead and keep Institution ID. Here you will indicate if you want to add a prefix or suffix to the identification number of an externally managed user. Post-migration, customers load patron records into ALMA from their local bursar system. In order to ensure a proper patron match, customers must be certain that an identification number in Voyager will migrate to ALMA as a matchable identification number in ALMA. Typically, the identification number in ALMA must match an identification number available to LDAP, Shibboleth, or some other external authentication system. The LDAP or Shibboleth identification number is often different than the regular institution ID, and the difference is almost always indicated by a prefix or suffix. We're going to go ahead and keep none. Based on the previous question, you would enter in a value. If you answered something other than none, you would put it in. Since we answered none, we're going to leave this one blank. Here you would enter in a 2-letter code for the default conversational language for your users. The default for this question is EN. You can refer to the link provided in the migration guide for a list of ISO codes. The last question of patron group codes, which will migrate as internal to ALMA, please note that ALMA categorizes users as either external or internal. External patrons are managed by an external system, such as through a regular load from the bursar's office campus student information system, and internal patrons are created and managed internally. Examples of internal patrons are community borrowers or alumni. You would identify the patron groups that are internally managed and provide the list of groups using a comma as delimiter. We'll go ahead and enter in. It is recommended that you refer to the ALMA Migration Guide for more information about patron migration processes that do not require your input. Let's go back to the questionnaire tab and discuss the fields related to acquisitions. The first question is whether your library contracted with Ex Libris to migrate acquisitions data. You will select full, none, or partial from the drop-down list over here, depending on the mode that you have contracted with Ex Libris for the acquisitions data migration. We're going to go ahead and choose full. For closed purchase orders that are new and older than X years, inactive purchase orders are migrated as closed. Inactive is defined when the status is new or pending, but never sent to the vendor, and the status date is more than a specific number of years old. The default is set to 0, which means that none should be moved to closed. However, you can indicate from anywhere between 1 to 5 years, as can be seen in the drop-down list. We're going to go ahead and choose 2 years. For closed purchase orders that are sent and older than X years, in this case, inactive is defined when status order is sent to vendor. However, nothing has been received, and the status date is more than a certain number of years old. You have the same options as were available in the previous question, so we'll go ahead and choose 2 years. For closed purchase order that are single part 0, have been invoiced but are older than X number of years, here inactive is defined as invoiced, a single part, and also older than the number of years that are available in the dropdown. We'll go ahead and choose 3 for this question. For the next 2 questions regarding central order library and default order library, please note that the order location field specifies the order location for orders in Voyager. The migration attempts to map the order location field to the corresponding ALMA library. If you want to override this order location field and instead assign an order library to all orders migrated, enter a library code value for the central order library question. Otherwise, if you want to use the order location field to determine the order library, you would leave the central order library blank and enter a library code value in the default order library question. In this case, the migration attempts to determine the library based on the order location field, and only when a library is not specified or a mapping is not found does it use the default order library. Again, you can only fill in one of these 2 questions. So for central order library, we're going to go ahead and select main, and we'll leave the default order library blank. In renewal date, you would provide your estimated renewal date for all your active subscriptions. If the renewal date is earlier than the migration date, or if the last invoice date is more than a year earlier than the migration date, the migration program uses a set renewal date, which is specified here. The subscription interval date is determined from the line item claim interval if it exists. If it does not, it is set to 30 days. Make sure to use the specified date format like this. Now for the fund sections of acquisitions. In order to have functioning ledgers, fiscal periods are required. In this field, you should specify your fiscal period as a 2-digit day, 2-digit month, and 1-digit cycle. For example, a 1-year fiscal period starting on January 1st would be indicated like this. A 1-year fiscal period starting on July 1st would be indicated like this. This is the default, so we'll go ahead and leave it. For this question, if you choose yes, it means you will use the fiscal period map tab on the migration form. We're going to skip this question, come back in a second, and take a look at which fiscal year is your current fiscal year. This question is important depending on whether or not you have run fiscal period close in your legacy ILS, or if you will run it in ALMA after the migration. If you do not know how to answer this, you should use determine by date of conversion. For which year do you use to name the fiscal year, we'll go ahead and choose first year. For this question of map reporting codes, depending on your response to the next question of convert reporting funds to allocated funds, you may be migrating reporting funds to reporting codes in ALMA. If so, you may also want to reduce the number of reporting codes that are migrated. Choose yes if you want to reduce the number of codes and also fill in the mapping table in the tab labeled reporting codes, which we'll take a look at in a moment. If no, use the reporting fund name as the new reporting code name in ALMA with no changes. we're going to go ahead and choose yes. For convert reporting funds to allocated funds, instead of using reported funds, ALMA uses instead a reporting code. The reporting code is stored in the transaction record as either an encumbrance or expenditure, and in the purchase order, and can be reported on for statistical purposes. Customers migrating from ALMA may either decide to convert reporting funds to reporting codes, or they may decide that the reporting funds be converted into actual allocated funds in ALMA. If choosing no, which is recommended, then the transactions linked to the reporting fund in Voyager is moved to the reporting fund's parent allocated fund, and the transactions will be assigned the reporting fund code for statistical purposes. Be aware that when this option is chosen, the parent allocated fund show a negative balance, since the allocation to the reporting fund is not transferred to the parent. If choosing yes, then the reporting fund becomes an allocated fund at the same level or sibling of its former parent allocated fund in ALMA. In this case, the transactions that are at the reporting fund level in Voyager are linked to the corresponding and newly created allocated fund in ALMA. We're going to go ahead and choose yes. You should use the Reporting Codes tab if you wish to map values from the Form field to the ALMA Reporting Code field. This tab should only be filled in if you answered yes to the question of Map Reporting Codes on the Questionnaire tab. Let's take a look at the columns on the Reporting Codes tab. The first one, Voyager Reporting Fund Code, the migration program automatically populates the tab with your current Voyager reporting codes. The default ALMA reporting code contains the desired code value for the reporting code in ALMA. And last, the ALMA reporting code name is the name for the reporting codes as they will be in ALMA. This field is used to create a code table that will then be loaded into ALMA, and its value can be easily changed after migration. Please note that you're more than welcome to consolidate values from the default reporting code into the ALMA reporting code, as you can see over here, when the following were then consolidated over here. Regarding validation, what you'll see over here is we have padding spaces, or extra spaces after the inputted value in these two cells, which if we go to the validation page and run it, they'll both be flagged, where we can then go to the troubled cell, remove the space from there, and from here, rerun the validation, forgot to remove the next one over there, we'll go ahead and do that, rerun it, and the errors on that sheet are no longer there. The PO Line Types tab is not mandatory. If no changes are made to the recommended defaults, then those defaults are used in migration. A primary reason to make changes to the mapping is that there may be some differences in purchase order usage based on the type of material that was ordered. Let's take a look at the columns on the PO Line Types tab. The first one, Voyager PO Line Types, you would find the code of the Voyager purchase order line type. In Voyager PO Line Types description, you would have a description of the purchase order line type for informational purposes. For the optional Voyager Mapped Reporting Code, if you choose to convert reporting funds to reporting codes in ALMA, then you may use the reporting code here to distinguish purchase orders. Additionally, if you choose to map the reporting codes, the mapped value is what is used here as well. For the ALMA purchase order line type, you'll have the PO line type in ALMA, which can be one of the values available in the drop-down list, as can be seen over here. Now let's take a look at the Fiscal Periods tab. We'll switch over to the form in a moment to explain the various fields that need input from your institution, but please note that this tab is mandatory if you answered yes on the Questionnaire tab to the question of manually map fiscal periods from Voyager to ALMA. On the Fiscal Periods tab, in the first column, Voyager Fiscal Period, the migration form automatically populates this column with your current fiscal periods. For the fiscal period start date and end date, this would be the Voyager start and end dates of the fiscal periods, provided for the ease of decision making. In the last column, ALMA Fiscal Period, the ALMA Fiscal Period must be year-long with no overlaps across fiscal periods. though, you may define generous grace periods. You should select a fiscal period from the drop-down list. And if you have multiple overlapping fiscal periods in Voyager, you may have 2 or more Voyager fiscal periods being mapped to a single fiscal period in ALMA. One thing to note is that it's important to choose the fiscal period in ALMA from the drop-down so that you wouldn't have a situation like you would have over here, where if you were to go to the cover page, run the validation, you would get this error of an unexpected format. When clicking, you would see that there has been a break over here. We could go ahead and choose that year from the drop-down, head back, revalidate it, and you can see the validation process for the entire workbook has now been completed. And we come back here and we see it has been corrected. You can refer to the Voyager to ALMA Migration Guide for more information and specific examples on how to collapse down your current fiscal periods into 4 fiscal periods in ALMA. During migration, all resources are categorized as physical in the database, even if the record represents an electronic item. All records are converted to ALMA as physical initially. A second process then converts records identified as electronic to the electronic format. This is done by your institution providing Ex Libris with a list of records that are identified as being electronic as part of the data delivery in a certain format. Let's take a look at 3 physical to electronic questions that need to be answered on the questionnaire tab of the migration form. Which holding or bib field stores electronic link information? In this field, you will provide a 3-digit MARC field code plus subfield. Please be aware that only one subfield is allowed. The default is 856U, which we'll go ahead and enter in. Which holding or bib field stores electronic link public note? In this field, you will also provide a 3-digit MARC field code plus subfield. As with the previous entry, only one subfield is allowed here as well. The default is 856Z, which we'll go ahead and enter in. For the final question, which holding or bib field stores electronic provider name information, you would provide a 3-digit MARC field code and a subfield. Again, only one subfield is allowed, and the default is 856M, which we'll enter in. In the event that you would not like to use one of these, you could simply go ahead and enter in a value such as this. We're going to go ahead and leave it with the default as 856Z. For more information on the electronic migration approach to ALMA, you can refer to the Electronic Resource Handling in ALMA Migration document located on the Documentation Center under ALMA Migration. This brings us to the end of this presentation. In this session, we covered how to fill out the Voyager migration form and how to use the validation tool to ensure that all your data is correct prior to submission to Ex Libris. Thank you very much for viewing this session.